The 87-year-old man who stormed Normandy Beach sat frozen in disbelief. The teenager who just spat in his face was laughing. The diner went silent. That's when the rumble of 10 Harley-Davidsons shook the windows. What happened in the next 60 seconds would be captured on 3 phones, go viral within hours, and change one young man's life forever. But the bikers didn't do what you think. What they did was far more powerful, something the boy would never forget for the rest of his life. Before this story goes any further, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and state in the comments. Let's see how far this message of honor and redemption can reach. Whether you're in a small town or a big city, whether you know a veteran or you are one, let me know you're here. This story started in one diner. But what happened there? It's something every community needs to see. The alarm clock read 6:47 a.m. when John Thompson's eyes opened. No jarring buzz needed. His body had kept military time for 68 years, refusing to forget what basic training had burned into his bones. At 87 years old, John moved through his small apartment with the careful deliberation of a man who understood that every morning was a gift, not a guarantee. His hands, weathered and marked with age spots that looked like faded maps of places he'd been, reached for the wooden box on his dresser. The same box he'd reached for every Saturday morning for as long as anyone could remember. Inside, nestled in worn velvet, lay 2 medals that had traveled further than most people ever would. The Purple Heart caught the early light filtering through his curtains, its gold border and purple ribbon somehow still vibrant after 8 decades. Next to it, the bronze star rested with quiet authority. Its center star a reminder of a moment John rarely spoke about, but never forgot. He lifted the Purple Heart first, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. For just a moment, barely a heartbeat. He was 19 again, the sound of waves crashing against a beach that ran red with the blood of boys who would never make it home. June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach. The day he learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite the terror that threatened to freeze every muscle in your body. The shrapnel that earned him this medal was still in his back, a permanent souvenir lodged near his spine, a daily reminder that he'd been one of the lucky ones. John pinned both medals to his chest with practiced precision, each placement exact, each angle correct. This wasn't vanity. This was remembrance. This was honoring the men who'd stood beside him, the ones who didn't come home, the ones whose names he still whispered sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn. By 8:30, John was walking through the door of Lou's Diner, just like he had every Saturday morning for the past 12 years. Ever since Emily passed, ever since the house became too quiet and the weekends became too long, the bells above the door chimed his arrival, and Sarah, the waitress who'd been pouring his coffee for over a decade, looked up with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Morning, John. Your booth's waiting." Your booth, not a booth. Your booth. The corner spot by the window where the morning sun warmed the worn vinyl seat, where he could watch the street come alive as the town woke up, where he'd sat across from Emily every Saturday until that last terrible year when the chair across from him stayed empty. John had no wife anymore, no children. They tried for years, but some blessings aren't meant to be. No siblings left breathing. But he had this booth. He had Sarah's coffee, always hot, always with exactly 1 sugar. He had Lou himself who'd flip him away from the kitchen. He had the other regulars who'd nod their good mornings. This diner had become his family, these people his tribe, and this routine his purpose. He slid into his booth, and Sarah was already there with the coffee pot, steam rising like a promise of warmth. "Looking sharp today, John," she said, nodding at his medals. "Special occasion?" John smiled. That small, quiet smile of a man who'd learned that not everything needs to be explained. Just remembering, Sarah. Just remembering. He wore those medals for a reason that morning. He couldn't have known they'd save a young man's soul. As John took his first sip of coffee, watching the Saturday morning sun paint golden streaks across Main Street, he had no idea this ordinary moment was about to become anything but ordinary. He didn't know that in exactly 43 minutes, his face would be on phones across the country. He didn't know that this Saturday would end up on national news. But John wasn't the only regular at Lou's that morning. 15 miles outside of town, in the gravel parking lot of Max's garage, 10 Harley-Davidson motorcycles sat in a perfect V formation. Their chrome catching the morning sun like mirrors aimed at heaven. The rumble of their engines created a symphony of American steel and horsepower that you could feel in your chest before you heard it with your ears. These were the Iron Guardians, and Saturday morning was their sacred ritual. Now, before you picture leather-clad vigilantes, understand something crucial about these men. This wasn't some outlaw motorcycle club. There were no criminal records here. No territorial disputes, no drug running or bar fights. Every single member of the Iron Guardians had one thing in common that mattered more than the patches on their vests or the bikes beneath them. They'd all worn a different uniform first. Every man standing in that parking lot was a veteran. At the front of the formation sat Daniel Ramirez, though everyone called him Gunny, short for Gunnery Sergeant, the rank he'd earned in the United States Marine Corps during 3 tours in Iraq. At 46 years old, Daniel carried himself with the posture of a man who'd learned to command respect without demanding it. His beard was more gray than black now, and the lines around his eyes told stories of sandstorms and firefights, and brothers lost to wars that never seemed to end. But when he smiled, which he did often, you could see the kid from San Antonio who'd enlisted at 18 because he wanted to be part of something bigger than himself. Beside him was Tommy Doc Harlan, Army medic, Afghanistan, whose hands had held together more wounded soldiers than he could count. Next to Doc was James Preach Carter, Navy chaplain, who delivered last rites on aircraft carriers and comfort in combat zones. There was Miguel Ortiz, Air Force Para-Rescue, the man they sent when everyone else had given up. Robert Lee, Army engineer, who'd cleared IEDs from roads that children walked to school. Each man had a story. Each man had served. Each man had come home different than he'd left. Their weekly breakfast ride had become more than tradition. It had become therapy. 2 hours every Saturday morning where they didn't have to explain the nightmares or the hypervigilance or why certain sounds made them flinch. They just rode, brothers in leather instead of fatigues, finding peace in the wind and the brotherhood that only veterans truly understand. They had one rule that morning: stay off Main Street. Lou's diner would be packed with the Saturday crowd, and the last thing they wanted was to intimidate families just trying to enjoy their pancakes. They'd take the scenic route, loop around the lake, stop at the overlook for coffee from their thermoses. Simple, peaceful, safe. They'd break that rule in less than an hour. What made the Iron Guardians different wasn't just that they rode together. It was what they rode for. Their mission statement was simple, only 4 words long. But those 4 words had become their North Star. No veteran stands alone. They escorted elderly veterans to medical appointments when family couldn't. They stood honor guard at military funerals, forming protective walls of leather and respect when protesters dared to show their faces. They'd spent countless Saturdays helping veterans move, fix cars, repair homes, navigate VA paperwork. Whatever was needed, whenever it was needed, they showed up. If you believe veterans deserve respect, hit that subscribe button. Show these heroes you're with them. Daniel checked his watch, raised his fist in the air, the signal, and 10 throttles opened as one. The Iron Guardians pulled onto the highway, heading away from town, away from Main Street, away from Lou's diner. Daniel had his phone in his pocket, set to silent. He didn't know that in 37 minutes it would buzz with a text message that would change the trajectory of their entire morning. That motto, "No veteran stands alone," was about to be tested in a way none of them imagined. Because right at that moment, sitting in his corner booth at Lou's diner, John Thompson was anything but alone. But he would be soon. And when he needed them most, the Iron Guardians would know exactly what to do. The black BMW M4 came screaming into the parking lot of Lou's diner at 9:17 a.m. Music thumping so loud the bass rattled the windows of nearby cars. Ryan Bennett sat behind the wheel, 19 years old, and convinced the world existed for his entertainment. His designer sunglasses probably cost more than Sarah made in a week. The watch on his wrist, a graduation gift from his father, could have paid John's rent for 6 months. But Ryan didn't think about things like that. Ryan didn't think much about anything except his phone, his followers, and his next viral moment. 3 of his friends poured out of the car with him, all of them wearing the particular brand of disheveled that comes from not having gone to bed yet. They'd been at Chad's lake house since Friday night, and the party had bled straight through into Saturday morning. Empty bottles, bad decisions, and the kind of laughter that comes when you're young enough to believe consequences happen to other people. They were hungry, still buzzing, and looking for something, anything to keep the energy going. Now, Ryan wasn't born evil, but privilege without perspective creates monsters. He'd grown up in a house with 7 bedrooms and parents who wrote checks instead of showing up. He'd been given everything except the one thing that matters: someone to tell him no and mean it. His father was too busy building his real estate empire. His mother was too busy pretending the wine at lunch was her first drink of the day. And Ryan had learned early that attention from strangers on the internet felt better than silence from the people who were supposed to love you. His phone was always out, always recording, always hunting for content. He had 43,000 TikTok followers. Not quite influencer status, but enough to make him feel important, enough to make him feel seen. He'd been suspended from State University just 3 weeks earlier for a hazing incident that had sent a freshman to the hospital. His father had made some calls, written some checks, and the whole thing disappeared. Just like always, no consequences, no accountability, no reason to change. His phone was already recording when he walked into Lou's. He wanted content. He was about to get more than he bargained for. The 4 of them burst through the door like a tornado made of cologne and entitlement, their voices too loud, their energy too aggressive for a quiet Saturday morning. Sarah looked up from the coffee pot she was refilling at table 6, and something in her stomach dropped. She'd been waitressing for 22 years. She knew trouble when she saw it walk through her door. She moved quickly, professionally, positioning herself between them and the main dining area. Her smile was polite but firm as she grabbed for menus. She was already calculating in her head. The back corner booth far from John, far from the families with small children, far from anyone they could bother. But Ryan had other ideas. His eyes swept the diner and landed on John in his corner booth. Medals catching the light, sitting alone with his coffee and his memories. Ryan's face lit up with that particular expression people get when they found exactly what they didn't know they were looking for. Ryan pointed. His voice carried across the entire diner. Too loud, too sharp. He wanted the booth right there next to the old guy. That one, specifically. Sarah would later testify she felt something was wrong the moment they walked in. She tried to redirect them, explaining that booth was reserved even though it wasn't. But Ryan's friends were already moving, already laughing, already making it a thing. And Ryan Ryan had his phone up recording because if something was happening, it needed to be captured. It needed to be posted. It needed to get views. They crashed into the booth next to John's like they owned the place, their energy filling the space like smoke. Ryan's friend Tyler was scrolling through his own phone. Chad was doing a handstand against the wall for no reason at all. Brandon was ordering Sarah around like she was his personal servant, not even looking at her when he spoke. But Ryan's attention was fixed on John, on those medals, on the fact that this old man sitting alone made the perfect target for whatever Ryan's brain was cooking up. His followers would love it. Something edgy, something unexpected, something that would get shares and comments and make him feel relevant for another day. Tyler leaned in, his breath still sour with alcohol. He whispered just loud enough for Ryan to hear, but quiet enough that John couldn't. The words were a dare disguised as a joke. Bet you won't mess with that old dude. What none of them knew, what Ryan had forgotten because he'd been 5 years old and barely remembered, was that his own grandfather had been a World War II veteran, had worn medals just like those, had sat in diners just like this one, and told stories about courage that Ryan had been too young to understand and too old to care about by the time he might have listened. John noticed them. How could he not? Their noise had pulled him from wherever his mind had drifted. He looked up, made eye contact with Ryan, and did what John always did. He gave a polite nod, a small gesture of acknowledgement, one human to another. The kind of simple respect that costs nothing and means everything. That nod would cost him his dignity, but it would earn him an army. Ryan saw that nod and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a smile that said he just decided what he was going to do. He stood up, phone already in his hand, already recording, already composing the caption in his head. And that's when Ryan stood up, phone in hand, and walked toward John's table. Ryan walked toward John's table with the confidence of someone who'd never actually been hit in the face. His phone was held out in front of him, camera pointed, that little red recording dot glowing like a warning light that no one heeded. His footsteps echoed in what had suddenly become a too-quiet diner. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they lowered. They shifted. People felt it, that electric charge in the air right before something terrible happens. John looked up from his coffee as Ryan's shadow fell across his table. For a moment, just a heartbeat, their eyes met. John's were blue, faded like old denim, carrying the weight of things he'd seen that Ryan couldn't begin to imagine. Ryan's were brown, bright, and utterly empty of anything resembling wisdom. Ryan's voice came out loud, performative, designed for the camera and the audience he imagined watching. Later, he gestured at John's chest, at the medals pinned there with such care. His tone dripped with mockery, with a particular cruelty that comes easy to people who've never had to fight for anything real. Yo, you get those at a thrift store, old man? They selling valor at Goodwill now? The words landed like stones thrown at stained glass. 3 tables over, a father put his hand over his young son's ears. At the counter, a middle-aged woman's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Lou in the kitchen heard it through the service window, and his jaw tightened. John set down his coffee cup with careful precision. His hands didn't shake. Not yet. He looked at this boy, because that's what Ryan was, really just a boy. And when he spoke, his voice was steady, quiet, carrying the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. I earned them in France, son, for words. Simple, true, weighted with history that Ryan would never understand because he'd never bothered to learn it. Ryan's friends erupted in laughter from their booth. Tyler had his phone out too, now recording from a different angle. Chad was smacking the table, making it rattle. Brandon was already typing on his phone, probably drafting the post, thinking about hashtags. 3 other diners had their phones out too, recording this moment from their own tables, their faces tight with discomfort and disbelief. They'd upload those videos within the hour, but we'll get to that. Sarah stood frozen by the coffee station, the pot still in her hand, watching this unfold and trying to calculate her next move. She'd dealt with difficult customers before. Drunk ones, angry ones, even violent ones. But this felt different. This felt like watching a car accident in slow motion, every second stretching out, inevitable and awful. Ryan wasn't done. He never was. People like Ryan don't know when to stop because they've never had to learn. He slid into John's booth without asking, without permission, his body language aggressive and invasive. He put his feet up on the vinyl seat across from John, his expensive sneakers leaving scuff marks that would still be there weeks later. His phone never wavered, always recording, always watching. "My grandfather was in the war," Ryan said, his voice sharp with something that might have been anger or might have been the residue of whatever he'd been drinking all night. "You guys just took credit for it, right? Walked around like heroes when you probably hid in some ditch the whole time." The diner went completely silent now. Even the clatter from the kitchen stopped. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, shocked into stillness by the sheer audacity of what was happening. John's expression changed then, not to anger. John had learned long ago that anger was a luxury he couldn't afford, but something flickered across his weathered face. Sadness, perhaps. Disappointment in what humanity could become when given too much and taught too little. He leaned forward slightly, his voice still calm, still measured, still trying to reach whatever part of this boy might still be reachable. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of you, son." That comment, those specific words, they'd matter more than anyone knew. Ryan's face flushed red, color creeping up his neck like spilled wine on white linen. He'd been called out before, by teachers, by deans, by his father during one of their rare conversations, but never like this. Never by someone who meant it with such quiet certainty. Never by someone who actually knew what shame should look like. From their booth, his friends sensed the shift. They sensed Ryan's ego bruising, his dominance challenged, his performance faltering. They did what friends like that always do. They fed the fire. Their voices rose in a chant, primitive and ugly, egging him on like Romans at the Colosseum. "Do it! Do it! Do it!" But do what? What was it? Even they didn't know. They just knew they wanted more content, more chaos, more of whatever this was becoming. Sarah was already reaching for her phone behind the counter, her hands shaking as she tried to dial, tried to get someone. Police, manager, anyone, to stop what was about to happen. She was 10 seconds too late. 10 seconds that would haunt her for months afterward, wondering what might have been different if she'd just moved faster. Ryan stood up from the booth, his body coiled with that dangerous energy of wounded pride and liquid courage still coursing through his system. He leaned over the table, invading John's space. His face inches from the old man's, his breath hot and sour. John didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give Ryan the satisfaction of fear. And then Ryan stood up, leaned over the table, and did the unthinkable. What happened next took less than 2 seconds, but would replay in the minds of everyone present for the rest of their lives. Ryan gathered the saliva in his mouth with deliberate intention, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite a snarl. And then he spat. The sound was wet and sharp, cutting through the silence like a gunshot. It wasn't the sound itself that people would remember most. It was everything that came after it. The trajectory was precise, almost as if Ryan had aimed, though that would give him too much credit. The spit traveled across the short distance between his mouth and John's chest, and it landed exactly on the purple heart medal. the medal John had earned when shrapnel tore through his back on a beach in Normandy. The medal that represented blood and sacrifice, and brothers who never came home. The liquid clung there, viscous and obscene, sliding slowly down the purple ribbon, catching the light from the window in a way that made it impossible not to see, impossible not to process, impossible not to understand exactly what had just happened. If you believe people should be treated fairly, hit subscribe. Trolls won't show this veteran. We stand with him. John's face didn't contort with rage. That would have been easier somehow, more expected, more human. Instead, what crossed his weathered features was something far worse. A deep, bottomless sadness. The kind of sadness that comes when you've survived hell itself, only to discover that the country you bled for has raised children who don't understand what that bleeding meant. His eyes, those faded blue eyes that had seen the worst of humanity 80 years ago, now saw it again in a Saturday morning diner over eggs and coffee. The entire diner gasped as one organism, a collective intake of breath that sucked all the oxygen from the room. A woman at table 4 covered her mouth with both hands. The father who'd covered his son's ears was now covering the boy's eyes. Lou stood in the kitchen doorway, his face drained of color, a spatula hanging limp in his hand. Ryan was laughing. That high, performative laugh of someone who knows they've crossed a line but is too committed to the bit to back down now. His phone was still up, still recording, capturing his own moment of cruelty for posterity. He turned the camera to show his face, making sure his followers could see how edgy he was, how fearless, how willing to do what others wouldn't. "Respect that old man," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly on the last word, betraying something underneath the bravado. Fear, perhaps, or maybe just the recognition that he'd done something he couldn't undo. Outside, exactly 4/10 of a mile away, 10 Harley-Davidsons made a decision. Daniel's phone had buzzed in his pocket 30 seconds earlier. A text from Sarah. "Simple and urgent. Need help. Veteran disrespected. Please." Daniel had raised his fist. The formation had turned. They were coming. But inside Lou's diner, nobody knew help was coming. All they knew was the awful present moment stretching out like taffy, sticky, and impossible to escape. John sat motionless. The spit continued its slow descent down his medal, and he didn't move to wipe it away. Didn't reach for a napkin. Didn't acknowledge it at all. His hands, which had been steady when he lifted his coffee cup, now trembled. Not with age, not with weakness. Anyone who knew trauma could recognize what was happening. His body was responding to a threat the way it had learned to respond 80 years ago. Fight, flight, or freeze. John was freezing. Sarah was already rushing over, tears streaming down her face, a handful of paper napkins clutched in her shaking hands. She was making small sounds, something between crying and gasping, unable to form words for what she'd just witnessed. Her hands hovered over John, wanting to help, but not knowing where to start. Not wanting to touch him without permission, not wanting to make this violation worse by adding her own. 2 male patrons were rising from their seats, chairs scraping against linoleum, their faces red with an anger that was finally finding direction. One of them, a construction worker named Mike, who'd been coming to Lou's for 15 years, was already moving toward Ryan, his fists clenched. But Ryan's friends had sensed the shift. The energy in the room had changed from shocked stillness to something dangerous, something that even their alcohol-soaked brains could recognize as a threat. Tyler grabbed Ryan's arm, pulling him toward the door. Chad was already there, holding it open. Brandon was shouting, his voice urgent and afraid. "Dude, let's go! Let's go now!" They were dragging Ryan toward the exit, but Ryan resisted for just a moment. He stopped at the door, turned back, and with his phone still recording, delivered his final line. His voice carried across the diner, making sure everyone heard, making sure the camera caught it. "I'm posting this. You're going to be famous, old man. He was right about the famous part." "Dead wrong about who?" The bells above the door chimed as they tumbled out into the parking lot, leaving behind a diner full of witnesses and a veteran sitting alone with spit drying on his purple heart. For several seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The moment held them all suspended in its awful gravity. Then John finally moved. His trembling hand reached into his jacket pocket, slow and deliberate. Sarah thought he was reaching for a handkerchief, maybe to finally wipe away the indignity. But she was wrong. Everyone was wrong. John's fingers closed around something small and worn, something he carried with him always, and he pulled it out into the light. A photograph, old, faded, the edges soft from decades of handling. The image of a young soldier, barely more than a boy, in a World War II uniform. And that's when they heard it. All of them, starting as a distant rumble and growing louder, closer, more insistent. A sound that made the windows rattle in their frames and the coffee cups dance on their saucers. The sound that would change everything. Thunder on 2 wheels. Daniel stopped 3 feet away from Ryan. Close enough to be heard clearly. Close enough that Ryan could see every line on his face, every scar, every year of experience written in the creases around his eyes, but not close enough to touch. Not close enough to threaten. There was no aggression in his posture, no fists raised, no chest puffed out, just a man standing still, radiating the kind of authority that comes from having earned the right to speak. The diner held its breath. Everyone expected an explosion, shouting, perhaps violence, the kind of confrontation that matched the offense. That's what Ryan expected, too. You could see it in the way he'd braced himself, in the way his shoulders had hunched defensively, in the way his eyes darted toward the door, calculating if he could make it. But Daniel didn't yell. His voice, when it came, was quiet, almost conversational, the kind of tone a teacher might use with a student who disappointed them. Somehow that made it worse. "What's your name, son?" The question hung in the air. So simple, so human. Ryan's mouth opened and closed twice before sound came out. His voice cracked like he was 13 again instead of 19. Or Ryan. Daniel nodded slowly, as if Ryan had just confirmed something he'd suspected. His eyes never left Ryan's face. Never wavered. Never blinked. It was the kind of eye contact that made you feel seen in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. The way a searchlight finds something trying to hide in darkness. "Ryan, did you serve?" Ryan shook his head. The word came out small, barely audible. "No. Did your friends?" Another headshake. "No." Daniel let the silence stretch between them. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The quiet was more devastating than any speech could have been. It gave Ryan time to think about those answers, to understand what they meant in the context of what he'd just done, to feel the weight of his own ignorance settling on his shoulders like a wet coat. Comment. "I stand for justice if you're not siding with the bully." Let's fill this comment section with honor. Sarah would later say this was scarier than any screaming match could have been. The control in Daniel's voice, the measured deliberateness of every word. The way he made that diner feel like a courtroom where judgment was being passed with terrible precision. She'd seen bar fights, seen men puff up and threaten and throw punches. This was different. This was worse. This was a man who knew exactly how much power he held and chose to wield it with surgical precision. Daniel took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the diner. He wasn't speaking just to Ryan anymore. He was speaking to all of them, bearing witness, making sure this moment was understood by everyone present. "That man you spat on, his name is John Thompson." Ryan flinched at the word spat as if it had been a physical blow, as if hearing his action described in plain language made it real in a way it hadn't been when he was performing for his phone. Daniel continued, his voice steady and relentless as a drumbeat. "John Thompson enlisted in the United States Army in 1943. He was 18 years old. They put him on a boat and sent him across an ocean to a place called Normandy. You know what Normandy is, Ryan?" Ryan nodded, uncertain. He'd heard the word, probably seen a movie. But Daniel could tell from his face that the boy didn't really know, didn't really understand. June 6th, 1944. D-Day. John Thompson landed on Omaha Beach in the first wave. You know what the first wave means? It means you're the one who tests whether the bullets are real. John ran up that beach while machine gun fire cut down the men beside him. He ran through water that turned red with the blood of his friends. He made it to the seawall. He survived. Most didn't. The diner was silent except for Daniel's voice. Even the sound of breathing seemed intrusive. He was wounded twice, once in France, once in Belgium. The Purple Heart on his chest, that one you spat on. He earned that when shrapnel from an artillery shell tore through his back. The metal is still in there, still in his spine, 80 years later, still there. He wakes up with that pain, every single morning, every morning for 8 decades. Ryan's hands were shaking now, not the tremor of fear, but the quake of realization, of understanding beginning to dawn like a cold, terrible sunrise. The Bronze Star. You see that other medal? He earned that when he ran back into enemy fire to pull 3 wounded men to safety. 3 men who went home to their families because John Thompson decided their lives were worth more than his own safety. That's who you spat on. Daniel wasn't done. Not even close. He took a step toward Ryan, and the boy actually flinched, his body betraying the bravado his mouth had been selling just minutes earlier. But Daniel still didn't touch him. Didn't need to. His presence was enough. John Thompson is 87 years old. He lost his wife 3 years ago. He has no children. He lives alone. He comes to this diner every Saturday morning and sits in that same booth because the people here are his family. Because after everything he sacrificed, after everything he gave, this is what he has left. And you spit on him for entertainment. Then Daniel did something that broke Ryan completely. He walked back to John's booth with careful, measured steps. John was still holding the photograph, his trembling fingers white-knuckled around its edges. Daniel bent down, his voice soft now, asking permission without words. John looked up at him, their eyes meeting in a moment of understanding that transcended language. John held out the photograph. Daniel took it with the reverence of someone handling a holy relic. He walked back to Ryan, holding the old, faded picture out where the boy could see it clearly. The light from the window caught the image, a young soldier barely older than Ryan himself, wearing a United States Army uniform from World War II. His face was open, unguarded, full of the kind of hope that only exists before the world teaches you to be afraid. Recognize him? Ryan stared at the photograph, his brow furrowed in confusion at first, his brain struggling to make connections through the fog of fear and alcohol still lingering in his system. Then something shifted in his expression. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. The color that had drained from his face earlier now disappeared entirely, leaving him pale as paper. That's my... He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't make his mouth form the words that his brain was screaming. Daniel's voice was soft now, almost gentle, which somehow made what he said next even more devastating. Your grandfather? Yes. His name was William Bennett. He served in the same unit as John. Same company, same battles. They were friends, Ryan. They ate together, slept in the same foxholes, watched each other's backs when the shells were falling. Ryan's knees buckled. He didn't fall completely, but he swayed, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the jukebox behind him. John was with your grandfather when he died. Belgium, winter of 1944. They'd been pinned down for 6 hours. A sniper got him. John held his hand while he bled out in the snow. Your grandfather's last words were about his wife, about his baby boy. Your father. He made John promise to check on them, to make sure they were okay. Tears were streaming down Ryan's face now, silent, uncontrollable. The kind of tears that come from somewhere deep and unexpected, from a wound you didn't know you had until someone pressed on it. John kept that promise. He's been sending your grandmother cards every year for 40 years. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, never signed his name, just wrote, "A grateful friend." She probably never knew they were from him, but John remembered. John kept his word to a dying man. Ryan made a sound that wasn't quite a word, wasn't quite a sob. His phone was still in his hand, still recording, capturing every second of his complete and total destruction. The device that had been his shield, his validation, his connection to the world he thought mattered, suddenly felt like a lead weight. That's when Ryan did something none of his followers would believe. He looked down at the phone in his hand, at the red recording light that had been his constant companion, his proof of existence, his window to the validation he'd been chasing. And then, with a movement that seemed to happen in slow motion, his fingers opened. The phone fell. It hit the floor with a crack that echoed through the silent diner, the screen shattering into a spider web of broken glass. The recording light flickered once, twice, and went dark, and the world watched it shatter. Daniel let the silence hold for another moment. Let Ryan's sobs fill the space where words should be. Let the weight of what had been revealed settle like dust after an explosion. Then he spoke again, and his voice had changed. Still firm, still commanding, but now carrying something else. Purpose, direction, a way forward through the wreckage. This is what happens now. Ryan looked up through tear-blurred eyes, his face streaked and raw, waiting for the sentence he knew he deserved, waiting for the punishment that would fit what he'd done. Part of him probably wanted it, wanted something harsh enough to match the magnitude of his shame. Something that would hurt enough to feel like atonement. Daniel laid it out with the precision of a man who'd thought this through, who understood that destruction without reconstruction was just cruelty wearing a different face. You're going to volunteer at the Veterans Center downtown. 200 hours of community service. You're going to show up every single day. They'll have you. You're going to learn every veteran's name who walks through those doors. First name, last name, branch of service, years they served. You're going to look them in the eye when they talk to you. You're going to hear their stories. Really hear them. Not for your phone, not for content. For yourself. Ryan was nodding before Daniel even finished, his head bobbing up and down like a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. He would have agreed to anything, would have walked across hot coals, would have given everything he had. Because that's what shame does when it's real. When it cuts deep enough, it makes you desperate for a path back to being human again. Yes, Ryan managed to choke out. Yes, I'll do it. Whatever you want, I'm not done, Daniel said. And there was steel underneath the mercy. You're going to clean. You're going to help veterans who can't drive anymore get to their appointments. You're going to sit with the ones who are alone. You're going to understand what you almost destroyed today. And maybe you'll understand what your grandfather died protecting. I will, Ryan said, and the words came out like a prayer, like a vow. I promise. I swear to God I will. Daniel studied him for a long moment, weighing the sincerity of those words, looking for the truth beneath the desperation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied something because he gave a single sharp nod. But there was more. There was always more. Because the world Ryan lived in, the digital world, the connected world, the world where everything lived forever in the cloud, that world had its own justice system, its own way of holding people accountable. Doc stepped forward. Then, one of the other bikers, the medic who'd learned to deliver hard truths gently. He was holding his phone, the screen illuminated, and his expression was grim. "Kid," Doc said, his voice not unkind, but not soft either. "Your video, the one you were recording, it auto-uploaded to your TikTok before your phone hit the ground." Ryan's face, which had just begun to show the faintest hint of something other than pure despair, crumbled again. His hand went to his pocket instinctively, reaching for the phone that was no longer there, that was now just broken glass and circuits on the diner floor. "It's already got 500,000 views," Doc continued, turning his phone so Ryan could see the screen. The numbers were climbing in real time. Views, shares, comments flooding in like a digital avalanche. "People are looking for you. Local news picked it up about 10 minutes ago. By tonight, you'll be on the national news." The comments were brutal. Ryan could see them scrolling past, each one a tiny knife. "Find this kid. Destroy him. Hope he gets what he deserves. Someone ID this punk." His username was right there in the video. His face was crystal clear. There was no hiding from this. No way to delete it. No way to take it back. No way to pretend it hadn't happened. Daniel took the phone from Doc and held it where Ryan could see clearly, making sure the boy understood the full scope of what he was facing. "The internet knows your face now, Ryan. Every person in this country with a phone is going to know what you did. Your name is going to trend. Your life as you knew it, it's over." "That's not a threat. That's just reality." Ryan's breathing was becoming rapid, shallow, the kind of breathing that precedes a panic attack. His eyes were wide and wild, looking for an escape that didn't exist. Daniel's voice cut through the rising panic. "You've got a choice to make. You can run from this, delete your accounts, change your name, hide, spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, hoping nobody recognizes you from that video. A lot of people would choose that." "Take the coward's way out." Daniel paused, letting that sink in, letting Ryan feel the full weight of that option. "Or," Daniel continued, and his voice softened just slightly, just enough to offer hope without promising ease. "You can own it. You can post a video from the Veterans Center after you've been there, after you've done the work, after you've learned what you should have known all along. You can show people that you're not just sorry. You're different. You can turn your shame into purpose." The diner was listening to every word. This wasn't just about Ryan anymore. This was about something bigger, about accountability and redemption, and whether people could change or whether one mistake defined you forever. "Show them the work," Daniel said. "Show them the veterans you're helping. Show them that you understand what you did wrong, and you're spending every day trying to make it right. The internet doesn't forgive easily, but it respects action. Give them action. Give them proof that this moment broke something open in you that needed to break." Ryan was staring at Daniel like a man seeing sunlight after months in a cave, like someone who'd been offered a map out of hell and couldn't quite believe it was real. You think they'd listen?" Ryan's voice was broken after what I did. "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But I know this. Hiding makes you a villain forever. Owning it and changing, that's the only shot you've got at being human again." Ryan had a choice. The whole diner could feel it. That moment of decision, that fork in the road where one path led to darkness and the other led to, well, not redemption exactly. Not yet, but maybe the beginning of a journey toward it. And what Ryan chose would surprise everyone who thought they knew how this story ended. Everyone who'd already written him off, already decided he was irredeemable, already moved on to the next outrage, the next viral moment, the next person to destroy. Ryan would prove them wrong. But that would come later. Right now, in this moment, something else needed to happen first. Something that would shift the energy in the diner from judgment to grace, from anger to honor, from punishment to healing. Because Daniel and his brothers hadn't come here just to teach a lesson to a foolish boy. They'd come because a veteran needed them, because John Thompson had sat alone with spit on his purple heart. And no veteran stands alone. That promise hadn't been fulfilled yet. That debt hadn't been paid. Daniel turned away from Ryan, dismissing him for the moment, and faced his brothers. They were still standing in formation, still creating that protective wall. He didn't need to speak. A slight nod was enough. They understood. The bikers did something for John that brought the entire diner to tears. The 10 bikers moved with the precision of a military honor guard, which made sense. That's exactly what they were. They formed a single line, shoulder to shoulder, facing John's booth. Daniel stood at the front, Doc beside him, then Preach, Miguel, Robert, and the others whose names would become important to John in the months to come. Their leather vests bore the patches of their service: Marine Corps Eagles, Army Stars, Navy Anchors, Air Force Wings, different branches, different wars. One brotherhood. Daniel stepped forward first. He stood before John with his back straight, his shoulders squared, his bearing that of a man who'd learned respect in boot camp and never forgotten it. His voice carried clearly through the silent diner, formal and deliberate. Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Ramirez, United States Marine Corps, 3 tours, Iraq. Sir, thank you for your service. Then he brought his hand up in a crisp salute. Not the casual wave some people give, a proper military salute. Hand to the brow, fingers together, held steady. The salute that means something. The salute that carries weight. John's hands, which had been trembling since the spit landed on his chest, went still. His eyes widened slightly, moisture gathering at the corners. Slowly, with movements that came from muscle memory buried deep after decades of civilian life, John raised his own hand. His arm straightened, his hand met his brow, and he returned the salute. He hadn't done that in years, hadn't needed to, hadn't been asked to, but the motion came back like breathing, like his body remembered what his mind had tried to let go. Doc stepped forward next. Sergeant Thomas Harlan, United States Army, combat medic, Afghanistan. Sir, thank you for your service. Salute given. Salute returned. Then Preach. Lieutenant Commander James Carter, United States Navy, chaplain, 7 deployments. Sir, thank you for your service. Salute. Return. One by one. Each biker approached. Each stated his name, his rank, his branch, his gratitude. Each saluted with the kind of respect that transcends generation and conflict. Each time John returned it, his posture straightening a little more with each exchange, his shoulders pulling back, something in him coming alive that had been dormant for too long. Sarah had disappeared into Lou's office. And now she emerged, carrying something folded carefully in her arms. The American flag, the one Lou kept in his office, the one he'd flown on September 12th, 2001, the one that meant something. She unfolded it with reverence and held it behind John, creating a backdrop of red and white and blue and stars. Now, I know this sounds like a movie, like something too perfect, too orchestrated, too symbolic to be real. But 47 phones recorded it from different angles. 47 pieces of evidence that this moment happened exactly as I'm telling you. It's all real. Something shifted in the diner. Then a woman at table 6 stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Then her husband beside her. Then the family at table 3. Then Lou himself stepping out from behind the counter, his spatula still in his hand. Then everyone, every single person in that diner rose to their feet. The applause started somewhere in the back. Maybe from Mike, the construction worker who'd been ready to fight earlier. It spread like wildfire. Genuine, thunderous, cleansing. The sound of people who'd witnessed something terrible transform into something beautiful, who'd seen shame and grace collide and somehow produce hope. John sat in his booth, surrounded by standing bikers, backed by an American flag, facing a diner full of people on their feet, applauding, and tears ran freely down his weathered face. Not tears of pain this time. Something else, something that looked like healing. When the applause finally faded, Daniel knelt beside John's booth again, his voice softer now. Personal, meant just for the old man's ears, though everyone strained to hear. John, we ride every Saturday morning. Breakfast at different spots around the county. We'd be honored if you'd join us. We've got a spare helmet. We've got space. He paused, making sure John understood what he was really saying. No veteran stands alone. That includes you. John's voice, when he found it, was rough with emotion, but steady. I haven't been on a motorcycle since 1946. Daniel smiled. Really? Smiled. The kind of smile that transforms a face. Then it's about damn time, don't you think? And John laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time that morning, for the first time in longer than he could remember, John Thompson laughed with pure joy. He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. Ryan was still standing near the jukebox, watching all of this unfold, his face a complicated map of emotions. Shame still dominant, but now mixed with something else. Awe, maybe. Or the beginning of understanding. Doc walked over to him. His approach wasn't threatening, wasn't angry, almost gentle. He put a hand on Ryan's shoulder. Not rough, not grabbing, just resting there. You're invited too, kid, Doc said quietly. After you've earned it, after you've put in the work, after you've proven you meant what you said, there's a place for you. But you've got to build the bridge to get there. That invitation would change Ryan's life in ways he couldn't imagine. And that brings us to today, 6 months later. 6 months is both forever and no time at all. Long enough for wounds to scar, long enough for habits to form, long enough for a life to change direction completely. John Thompson rides with the Iron Guardians every Saturday morning. Now he sits on the back of Daniel's Harley, his arms wrapped around the Marine's waist, his white hair flying in the wind beneath the helmet they bought him, the one with the Purple Heart emblem on the side. He's 87 years old and feels 20 again when those engines roar to life. The other bikers call him their lucky charm, their reminder of why they do what they do. But John knows the truth. He's the lucky one. He hasn't felt this alive in decades. The video changed more than just John's Saturday mornings. 12 veterans reached out after seeing it. Men and women who'd been isolated, struggling, convinced nobody cared about their service anymore. They come to Lou's Diner now. They joined the rides. They found community where there was loneliness. One man said John's story saved his life. John doesn't know what to do with that kind of gratitude, except pay it forward. Ryan Bennett completed 400 hours at the Veteran Center, double what Daniel required. He didn't stop because he had to. He kept going. He stopped because he'd run out of hours to give that semester. He enrolled in community college 2 months after that day at the diner, got his associate's degree in social work. He volunteers at 3 different veteran organizations now, and when people ask him why, he tells them about his grandfather, about John, about the worst day of his life that became the first day of his real life. He posts videos still, but they're different now. 47 of them so far, each one featuring a different veteran telling their story. No clickbait, no performance. Just listening, just honoring, just remembering. His follower count dropped at first. People wanted the old Ryan, the edgy Ryan, the train wreck Ryan. But then it grew again. Different people this time. Better people. His most viral video now has 8 million views. It's the one about his grandfather, William Bennett, told by the man who held his hand when he died. The photograph, the one John had been holding that day, is now framed at the Veterans Center. It hangs in the main hall where everyone can see it. Beneath it, a plaque. William Bennett, United States Army, 1923 to 1944. A grateful friend remembers. But here's what nobody expected. Every Saturday morning, before the motorcycle engines start, before the Iron Guardians roll out, Ryan Bennett walks into Lou's diner. He goes to the corner booth by the window, and John Thompson is already there, coffee steaming, waiting. They sit across from each other in that same booth where everything fell apart, where shame and grace collided, where a young man learned what it means to be accountable, and an old man remembered what it means to be needed. John tells Ryan stories about his grandfather, what William liked to eat, how he told jokes, the letter he wrote to his wife the night before D-Day. Ryan listens like his life depends on it, because in a way it does. Ryan calls John Gramps now, started doing it about 3 months in, tested it out carefully like someone walking on ice, worried it was too much, too presumptuous. John's eyes had filled with tears, and he'd smiled and said, "I'd be honored, grandson." John calls him grandson, not Ryan. Grandson, the word he never got to use in his own life, given freely to a boy who didn't deserve it, but desperately needed it. Remember when I said what the bikers did was more powerful than violence? This is why. Violence would have felt satisfying for 5 minutes, would have given everyone in that diner a story to tell about the day they saw a punk kid get what he deserved. But it would have ended there. Closed. Finished. Nothing growing from that soil. Grace, real grace, the hard kind that demands accountability and offers redemption, created something that violence never could. One moment of grace created a family where there was none. Here's what this story teaches us if we're willing to listen. Accountability without mercy is just cruelty. Mercy without accountability is just enabling. But when you combine them, when you hold someone responsible and simultaneously offer them a path forward, that's when transformation becomes possible. Daniel and his brothers could have destroyed Ryan that morning, could have dragged him outside and taught him a lesson that would have left scars. The entire diner would have cheered. The internet would have celebrated. Justice would have been served, hot and immediate and satisfying for about 5 minutes. Then what? Ryan becomes another cautionary tale, another canceled person, another life thrown away. John still sits alone with spit on his medals. The bikers ride away feeling righteous but unchanged. Everyone goes home with a story, but nothing actually gets better. Violence would have felt good for 5 minutes. This changed a life forever. John's grace that day, his willingness to extend his hand to the boy who just humiliated him. That was veteran strength, not the strength that comes from weapons or tactics or physical power, the strength that comes from having survived hell and deciding that creating more hell isn't the answer. That's what service teaches if you let it. That's what John learned on those beaches 80 years ago and remembered in a diner booth at 87. The ripple effect is still spreading. Ryan's 47 videos have helped over 200 veterans connect with services they didn't know existed. Mental health resources, financial assistance, community. Some of those veterans have posted their own videos now, creating a network of stories that remind people why respect matters. And there's one more thing you need to know. The Iron Guardians chapter expanded by 40 members after the video went viral. 40 more veterans who saw what happened and wanted to be part of something that stood for honor without violence, accountability with grace. They started a national program called No Veteran Alone. Chapters forming in 17 states now, each one committed to the same mission Daniel and his brothers lived out that Saturday morning. Ryan's working on something too. A social media platform designed specifically for veterans to share their stories, connect with services, find community. He's using what he knows, what he used to use for vanity and validation, and pointing it toward purpose. He calls it Grateful Friend, named after the cards John sent his grandmother for 40 years. John's story inspired 12 other viral videos of people showing respect to veterans in public. Acts of kindness caught on camera, shared millions of times, creating a counter-narrative to the cynicism and cruelty that usually dominates our feeds. The internet isn't all bad. Sometimes it shows us who we can become. So now it's your turn. If you stand against disrespect, and for second chances, hit that subscribe button. Show John, show Ryan, show every veteran watching that we've got their backs, because no veteran stands alone. And that starts with you. Your subscription isn't just a number, it's a statement. It says you believe in accountability. You believe in grace. You believe that people can change when given the chance and the challenge to do better. Comment the name of a veteran who changed your life. Let's fill this comment section with honor, not hate. Write their name. Write their branch. Write what they taught you. Let's create a memorial right here, right now, built not from stone, but from memory and gratitude. And if you see disrespect in your life, at a restaurant, in a store, online, anywhere, you know what to do now. Be the biker, be the grace, hold people accountable while offering them the chance to be better. That's how we change the world. One confrontation at a time. One moment of choosing something harder and better than revenge. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that shame can become purpose. That one moment doesn't define us, but what we do after it does. Maybe it's someone who's made mistakes and thinks they're beyond redemption. Maybe it's someone who's lost faith in humanity and needs to remember that grace still exists. Maybe it's a veteran who's sitting alone right now, wondering if anyone still remembers. Send them this. Let them know they matter. Let them know someone's still standing guard. There's a photograph that hangs in Daniel's garage now, right next to his workbench where he maintains the motorcycles. It was taken 4 months after that Saturday morning at Lou's Diner. The photographer was Sarah, her hand steady this time. No tears, just pride. In the photograph, John Thompson stands in the center, his back straight despite his 87 years. His medals are pinned to his chest, the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star catching the light the same way they did that morning. But clean now, polished, honored. His face carries a smile that reaches his eyes, the kind of smile that only comes when you found purpose again, after thinking your purpose was finished. Ryan Bennett stands beside him, close enough that their shoulders touch. He's wearing his volunteer badge from the Veterans Center, the one that lists his hours, 400 and counting. His face looks different than it did 6 months earlier. Older somehow, even though it's only been half a year. But it's the kind of aging that comes from growth, not time. His eyes are clear. His posture is humble. His hand rests on John's shoulder with the gentle respect of someone who's learned what touch can mean when it's offered right. Surrounding them are the Iron Guardians, all 10 of the original members, plus a dozen more who've joined since. Daniel stands directly behind John, his hand raised in salute. The others mirror him. A wall of leather and chrome and honor, all saluting the camera, all paying respect to the man who reminded them why they ride, why they serve, why brotherhood matters. At the bottom of the photograph, written in John's careful, trembling handwriting, are 4 words that have become more than a motto. 4 words that saved the young man's soul and gave an old man's life new meaning. 4 words that remind us all what we owe each other. No veteran stands alone. The image fades slowly to black, the faces disappearing into darkness like memories settling into history. And in that darkness, you hear it, the sound that started everything, the sound that changed everything, the sound that promises everything continues, the deep, thunderous rumble of a Harley-Davidson engine. It grows louder for just a moment, powerful and alive and moving forward.